The river looks calm, too calm. A ribbon of silver water winding between mangrove roots on drifting fig. To an invader's eye, it seems harmless, even beautiful. But beneath that still surface, death waits. Sharpened stakes sleep in the mud, buried deep like the teeth of an unseen beast. With every breath of the tide, they rise on fall. Waiting, witching. For centuries, this quiet stretch of water has swallowed empires, knit by chance, by design. In the spring of 1288, the world's greatest army came to this river, the army of Kublai Khan. They had burned cities across China, conquered Korea, crushed kingdoms in Central Asia. No fortress had stopped them, no navy had survived them. But here, at the B-1-1 River, they found an enemy unlike any before. One who fought not with numbers or strength, but with silence, patience, and time. It was not a storm that destroyed the Mongol fleet. It was a river that breathed like a living thing, and a people who learned to make that breath their weapon. This is the story of how D-1EA1-IVI-1EC7T, a small kingdom in the edge of empire, used the rhythm of nature to defeat the largest invasion fleet the Mongols ever built. The battle that turned the tide of history, literally. If you love stories of courage, resilience, unforgotten brilliance, journey with us. The past is calling. Let's answer it together. In the 13th century, the Mongol Empire ruled the earth like a force of nature. The Hussies drank from the rivers of Poland, and from the coasts of Korea in the same generation. Cities that once took centuries to build were reduced to ash in days. No kingdom was too distant, no wall too high. To the world, the Mongols were not an army, they were inevitability. At the center of this storm stood Kublai Khan, grandson of the great Genghis. He was more than a conqueror. He was a builder, a reformer, a ruler who believed that order could be coved from chaos. From his capital in Khanbalik, midden Beijing, he commanded a realm that stretched from the frozen steppes of Mongolia to the rice fields of Southeast Asia. His banners flew over half of humanity. And yet, in the far south, a single kingdom remained outside his reach. A narrow strip of land cradled by mountains, jungles, on the sea. D-1EA1IV, I-1EC7T. To Kublai, this small country was not merely another conquest. It was an open wound. Twice he had tried to subdue it. Twice he had failed. The first invasion, in 1258, was supposed to be swift. The Mongols expected the same submission that had followed everywhere else. Instead, they found a land that fought like the terrain itself, fluid, shifting, unyielding. Guerrilla ambushes struck from the mist. Disease and humidity did what no sword could. The Mongols withdrew, confused but unbeaten. They returned in 1285, stronger and angrier. Kublai's armies swept down from Yunnan, supported by a massive fleet sailing through the Gulf of Tonkin. They captured cities, forced the royal family to flee, and for a moment believed victory was near. But it was a mirage. As the invaders advanced, the land devoured them. Bridges collapsed, food vanished, rivers flooded behind them. And from the shadows came the counterattack, led by a nobleman whose name the Mongols would not forget, Toledo 1A7N Hung D-1EA10. Within months, the invaders were retreating through burning jungles, harassed at every step. The second campaign ended not in triumph, but humiliation for Kublai Khan. Such defiance was intolerable. Empires are not built in patience, they are built in certainty. He would erase this insult once and for all. So he planned a third invasion, larger than the first two combined. This time, it would be absolute. Not just conquest, but annihilation. He ordered new ships to be built along the southern Chinese coast, massive, deep-hulled vessels capable of carrying cavalry, siege engines, and supplies. The air in the shipyards was thick with the smell of pitch and sweat. Chronicles speak of tens of thousands of men, some records even claim 300,000. Whether exaggerated or not, the scale was unprecedented. It was the largest armada ever assembled in East Asia at the time. Commanding this invasion was Kublai's own son, Prince Tegan, young, ambitious, and desperate to prove himself worthy of his father's shadow. Alongside him were hardened generals Oma, a veteran of the Yuan conquests, and Sojtu, master of naval warfare. They had crushed kingdoms across Asia. Now they would march into D-1EA1IV-1EC7T, as if into a final lesson for the world. No one defies the Khan on lives. From the north, Mongol armies advanced through Yunnan and Guangxi. From the sea, the Great Fleet moved south, a wall of sails stretching across the horizon. Witnesses wrote of the ocean darkened by ships, the thunder of drums echoing from one end of the coast to the other. It was not an invasion, it was an eclipse. And yet, in Distroke letter 1EA1, IV letter 1EC7T, there was no panic. The Tulla 1A7N dynasty had known this day would come. King Tulla Na7 Han Tung, young yet tempered by war, sat beside his father, the retired emperor Tullo Nasvanan Thon Tung, two rulers bound by blood on duty. Together they placed their trust in one man, Tia letter 1EA7N Hung D-stroke letter 1EA10 Skulla. General, visionary, the man who had already broken the Mongols once before. He was not to worry a bond of arrogance. He studied the ancient wars of China, Korea, and the Sing dynasty, searching for patterns, mistakes, and the subtle rhythms of victory. He believed wars were not won by strength alone, but by understanding, if land, if time, if the human heart. To know your enemy, he once wrote, you must know his hunger. He knew the Mongols' hunger. It was not for food, but for certainty. They needed fast victories, clear roads, decisive battles. If denied these, their strength withered. So Hung D-stroke letter 1EA10 would give them what they wanted, until the very moment he took it away. He studied the map of his country like a dector reading a pulse. Mountains guarded the west, forests hid the north. But to reach the capital, the enemy would need the rivers. And among them, wind stood apart the B letter 1A Wench D-stroke letter 1EB1NG river. Its tides were alive, rising and falling almost a meter within hours. Its mud was thick and treacherous. Its channels shifted with the moon. To outsiders it was case. To those who lived beside it, it was a living thing predictable as breath. And that, he realized, was the key. If the Mongols were the storm, the river would be the tide that swallowed it. He began to plan a defense that no empire could comprehend. Not a wall of stone, not a fortress of men, but a weapon of patience. A river that would wait. A river that would remember. By the winter of 1087, the third invasion had begun. The sound of drums echoed across the Gulf of Tonkin as Mongol ships advanced. Villages burned. The horizon glowed red each night. D-stroke letter 1EA1 IV letter 1EC7T stood at the edge of extinction. And yet, in the shadows of the deltas, something was moving. Knit fear, knit retreat, preparation. The world's mightiest empire was coming. But this time, the river was ready. Tia letter 1SN Hung D-stroke letter 1EA10 knew that strength alone could not protect his homeland. The Mongols were unmatched in open battle. The cavalry had crushed Persia. Their fleets had stormed Japan. But in D-stroke letter 1EA1, IV letter 1EC7T, the terrain itself could become a weapon. The mountains, the swamps, the rivers, all could fight alongside their people. And among them, Win River held the key. The B letter Win Im H D-stroke letter 1EB Win NG. It flowed quietly through mangroves on lowlands before meeting the sea, its tides rising and falling with lunar precision. In this rhythm, Hung D-stroke letter 1EA10 saw destiny. He studied the river as a general studies an enemy. He observed how the water dropped almost a meter when the tide receded, how sharp wrecks appeared like hidden blades, how the currents shifted with the moon. It was unpredictable to Firenus, but to him, it was as familiar as breathing. And that knowledge would become his greatest weapon. He ordered his men to prepare the river for war, but not with walls or ships. With wood. From the forests came ironwood trees, dense and heavy. Thousands were cut, shaped, and sharpened to lethal points. Villages, soldiers, monks, and even children worked in secret, crafting stakes under torchlight. The bases were made flat so they would not sink. Some were capped with iron to pierce through hulls. Each was measured and placed according to the tides, too deep to see at high water, perfectly positioned to strike when the tide fell. Night after night, during low tide, men waded into the cold mud, pounding stakes into the riverbed with ropes on hammers. The operation took weeks. No one outside D-stroke letter 1EA1E of VI letter 1EC7T knew. No Mongol spy returned with news. Even traders who sailed the river saw only water on Feg. Beneath them, a forest of death was growing. While the river was armed in silence, another strategy unfolded in land. Hung D-stroke letter 1EA1 turned retreat into theater. Vietnamese forces engaged in brief clashes, then vanished into the trees. They left behind empty villages, burned granaries on scorched roads. To the invaders, it looked like panic. To Hung D-stroke letter 1EA10, it was choreography, a performance designed to pull the enemy deeper, to make them believe victory was near. Hunger began to gnaw at the Mongol troops. The local supply lines were gone, rice fields destroyed, livestock hidden. Tropical humidity spoiled what little food they carried. The Hossis, unaccustomed to the climate, weakened and died, yet pride drove them forward. Prince Tigan believed the retreat meant collapse. He imagined the glory of avenging two past defeats. He saw himself returning to Kublai's court crowned with triumph. From the capital, Tialeta 1A7N Enhan Tung, on Teleta 1A7N Thon Tung Wucht, waiting for their general's signal. The court's patience was tested. Even loyal ministers whispered that perhaps this time, the empire was too strong. But Hung D stroke Leta 1 EA1 OSIs remained in the tide. The river will decide, he said. And then came the bait. In early April, a small Vietnamese fleet appeared at the mouth of the Billet 1 D stroke Leta 1B1NG, pretending to retreat. Sails totted, men exhausted, they drifted upriver like prey cornered by a predator. Scouts rushed to Tigan's camp, reporting that the enemy was fleeing toward their last refuge. It was the moment he had been waiting for. Advance, he ordered. Crush them before they escape. Hundreds of ships began to move. War drums thundered, echoing through the mangroves. The sun rose over the delta, glinting off Bren's armor on gilded helmets. To the Mongols, the wide river looked like a perfect battleground. To Hung D stroke Leta 1 EA10, it was a stage set for a single performance, the drowning of an empire. By dawn in April 9, 1288, the tide reached its peak. The B Leta 1A 1 D stroke Leta 1 E Buen Ng gleamed wide on calm. Vietnamese vessels could be seen in the distance, drifting backward as if in fear. The Mongol fleet, the banas snapping in the wind, surged forward into the widening throat of the river. No one noticed the stakes beneath. No one heard the quiet sound of history waiting to rise. It began with a sound, barely audible above the drums on wind. A deep, slow crack, like the sigh of the river itself. Then came another, and another. The great Mongol flagship lurched, its hull grinding against something unseen. A soldier looked over the side and saw only ripples. Then, with a jolt, a sharp stake tore through the bottom of the vessel. Water rushed in. Panic spread like fire. The tide was falling. At first, they didn't understand. The river that had seemed so deep was now shrinking beneath them. Ships that had glided smoothly hours before began to tilt. Oars scraped the bottom. One by one, hulls split open, planks splintered, masts shuddered. The mighty fleet that had crossed oceans was now trapped in mud on wood. General Omar shouted orders to back away, but retreat was impossible. Behind them, more ships entered the bottleneck, colliding in confusion. The river was too narrow to turn, the current too swift to fight, the enemy too close to see. And then the fig moved. From both banks, hidden among the mangroves, thousands of Vietnamese soldiers emerged like ghosts. Small boats, fast on light, dotted between the immobilized warships. Arrows rained from the cliffs. Flaming bolts hissed through the mist. Every movement was coordinated, timed with the rhythm of the retreating tide. The river itself was in their side. T.O. Leta 1A7N Hung D stroke Leta 1 EA10 stood in the high bunk, his armor gleaming in the pale light, calm amid the case. He had chosen this exact hour, this exact tide. Every calculation, the distance of the stakes, the depth of the water, the impatience of the Mongols, had led to this moment. His orders were simple: strike without hesitation, vanish before retaliation, let the river finish what the stakes began. Across the water, the Mongols fought desperately. Arrows clattered against shields, men screamed for help, Hossis neighed in terror as the ships listed unflooded. Some soldiers tried to swim to shore but sank beneath the weight of their armor. Others leapt into smaller boats, only to be met by spears on fire. The river had turned into a cage. Each attempt to move only drew more blood. Above the case, the king himself appeared. Tuat Madan En Han Tung, golden armor stained with mud, rode along the bunk beside his father. Their presence electrified the soldiers. What emperor would risk his life beside Keeman men? The sight of their king in the thick of battle became a living oath. They would not let this river fall. The Vietnamese counterattack was relentless. Fire ships laden with oil and resin drifted into the trapped fleet, exploding into tuas of flame. The wind carried smoke on screams across the water. Some historians doubt the full extent of these fires, but the chronicles of both sides speak of the same image: columns of smoke twisting into the sky, the reflection of burning masts rippling across the tide. The Mongol banas, once symbols of terror, now burned like torches mocking their defeat. By midday, The water had fallen so low that ships sat exposed in the stakes, their bellies split open, their decks half submerged. The sounds of battle faded into groans of wood on men. General Oma was captured, his officers were slain. Prince Tegan, stranded with his land forces, could only watch the destruction unfold from the Shah, powerless. His fleet, the pride of Kublai Khan, was dying before his eyes. When the tide reached its lowest ebb, the B-1G D-1EB NG River resembled a battlefield from another world. Hundreds of ships lay scattered like broken bones. Masts jutted from the water at strange angles. Corpses floated between them, tangled in shattered rigging. The smell of pitch, salt, and blood hung heavy in the air. For the Mongols, it was the first time in their empire's history that the sea itself had turned traitor. As silence returned, only the wind remained, whispering through the reeds, carrying with it the echo of victory. The Vietnamese soldiers knelt by the river, exhausted, drenched, their weapons stained red. Some wept, others prayed. Hung de Stroke Letter 1EA1 looked out across the ruined fleet. He didn't cheer, he simply bowed his head. The river has spoken, he said. But the war was not yet over. Survivors fled north, dragging themselves through swamps and forests. Hung de Stroke Letter 1EA1 OS forces pursued them, striking from the shadows. The land itself became an ally, poisoned arrows, bamboo traps, hidden pits. Few Mongols ever saw China again. By the time Prince Tugan escaped, he was no longer a conqueror, he was a fugitive carrying the weight of failure. The invincible Mongol army had been broken, knit by storm, knit by fortress walls, but by patience, timing, and a river turned into a blade. In the days that followed, the Mongol invasion collapsed. The once glorious fleet lay scattered along the riverbanks, masts pointing skyward like the ribs of a fallen beast. The survivors stumbled north through jungles that swallowed whole armies. Ambushes awaited them at every turn, arrows tipped with poison, bridges cut, paths blocked by their own dead horses. The empire that had crushed kingdoms now limped home, reduced to whispers on ghosts. Prince Tigan survived, but not as a victor. His return to China was a silent march of shame. Kublai Khan raged in his palace when the news reached him. He punished his generals, executed his advisors, and demanded new strategies. But deep down, even the great Khan understood. There would be no fourth invasion. The cust had already consumed his empire's pride. For D-stroke Letter 1EA1 IV, I Letter 1 EC7T, the victory at B Letter 1 1 D-stroke Letter 1 EB1 NG was not only military, it was moral. It proved that the mind could outlast the sword, that wisdom could bend the course of history. The kings Tulato 17 Han Ting and Tulato 97 Thon Ting ordered the pursuit to stop. Let them go, they decreed. To destroy completely is to invite vengeance. To win and forgive is to end the war. Their words carried as much weight as the battle itself. Power tempered by restraint became their legacy. Centuries passed, the river changed its course, yet beneath layers of mud, the stakes remained, silent witnesses to the day when patience defeated power. When archaeologists unearthed them in the 20th century, carbon dating confirmed what legend had preserved. These were the real weapons of Beletta 1H D-Strokletta 1EB1NG. Not myth, but memory. Not a miracle, but mastery. The world often remembers empires by what they built. D-stroke Letter 1 Ni A1 1 IVI Letter 1 Ni C7T is remembered by what it understood. Today, the B Letter 1 Munch D-stroke Letter 1 EB1 NG River still breathes with the same tide. Its waters rise and fall over the resting place of an empire's pride. Beneath the surface lies a message written not in stone, but in patience. The lesson is timeless, no power is invincible, and no land too small to stand free. If you love stories of courage, resilience, unforgotten victories, subscribe on Journey with us through the echoes of history. Because in the end, the past is not gone, it waits, quietly, like the tide, to rise again.